You didn't fall for them. You fell for who you became around them. And now that they're gone, you're not missing a person. You're missing the only version of you who ever felt fully alive. They awoke a spiritual version of you that you'd never met before. You keep telling yourself, I miss them, and maybe that's true, but it's not the full truth. Because if we sit in silence for a little longer, if we slow your heartbeat just enough to listen to the ache beneath the ache, you'll feel something deeper. You don't just miss them, you miss the version of you that they somehow brought out. The version you didn't even know was inside you, until they entered the room. That person who could breathe again. That person who felt calm just by hearing their voice. That person who smiled without needing a reason. You miss how you felt like yourself in front of them, but not the broken, guarded self. The self that felt seen. That didn't have to pretend. That didn't have to carry years of emotional armor. That didn't have to explain why it's been so hard to trust anyone. Because with them, even if just for a moment, you felt like you belonged somewhere. Like you didn't have to try so hard to be enough. Like you were already okay, just as you were. That's why your heart still drifts toward their name. Not because they were perfect, not because they stayed, but because they were the moment you finally saw a version of yourself that you actually liked. And now you feel like you lost it, because they walked away. But what if I told you they didn't take that version of you with them? What if they didn't give it to you in the first place? In Buddhism, there's a quiet teaching. Some people don't come to stay. They come to awaken something. They arrive like matches. And you were the dry wood waiting, aching, ready to burn into light. They didn't create that light. They just lit the match. But it was always your fire, your energy, your soul. They didn't invent the joy you felt. They only helped you remember it. And now, in their absence, your mind thinks they were the answer. Your heart thinks they were the healing. But they weren't. They were the mirror. What you saw was you. And yes, I know it hurts. I know your chest tightens when their name flashes across your mind. I know you replay old conversations, wishing for one more chance to hold on to that feeling. Not even them, just the feeling. Because it wasn't about needing them. It was about needing to stay connected to the part of you that came alive when they were around. That version of you, it didn't die. It's not gone. It's just confused. Because it thinks it needs someone else's presence to feel worthy again. But the truth is, that version of you is still here, waiting, hiding behind the grief, beneath the pain, underneath the belief that you're not enough on your own. They didn't carry your light away with them. They only pointed at it. They triggered it. They cracked the wall just enough so your soul could shine through. And now, that soul is asking you to come back. Not to them, but to you, to the one who felt warm, to the one who felt real, to the one who didn't feel like a mistake, for being soft, emotional, and open-hearted. You're not crazy. You're not weak. You're not stuck. You're just grieving a version of yourself that you believed could only exist around them. But hear me, that's not true. That version of you isn't missing. It's just been waiting for you to finally see. You don't need them in the room to feel safe inside your own soul. You can return without permission, without apology, without waiting for anyone to come back. You can return to yourself, the most beautiful version of you, the one you thought only they could unlock. But it was never theirs. It was always you. And now it's time to come home. Your mind isn't replaying them. It's trying to complete an emotional ritual left unfinished. You keep asking yourself, why do I keep thinking about them? Even when you're busy, even when you're healing, even when you've already accepted that they're not coming back. You try to distract yourself. You delete pictures, block numbers, unfollow accounts. And for a while, it works. You feel okay, maybe even free. But then suddenly, they flash in your mind again. Random, uninvited. In the middle of dinner, or walking alone, or when you're finally starting to breathe without hurting, and you feel frustrated, like you're losing control, like you're back at day one, like your heart is playing games you don't understand. But it's not madness, it's not weakness, and it's not obsession. Your mind isn't replaying them because you're still in love. It's replaying them because something never finished. In Buddhism, the heart is seen as a sacred space, and when an emotion is too heavy to carry all at once, the mind returns to it in pieces, not to punish you, but to complete the ritual. You never got to say everything. You never got to sit in silence together, look into their eyes, and see the truth, without begging it to become something else. You didn't get to finish the conversation. You've had 100 times in your head. You didn't get to cry with them, only because of them. You didn't get to feel them slipping away, while still holding their hand. You only got the aftershocks, the leftover questions, the silence you weren't prepared for. And so, your mind keeps circling back, not because it wants them, but because it's still trying to close the door without slamming it. And that's why it hurts. Because the ending didn't feel like a full stop. It felt like a sentence that just vanished mid-word. The brain hates unfinished stories, but the soul, it just wants to understand. You weren't looking for forever. You were looking for clarity, for peace, for the moment where you both nod quietly and say, "We loved, we tried, and now we let go." But that moment never came. So now, it repeats, in dreams, in memories, in random flashbacks you didn't invite. You're not broken. You're just still inside the story your heart wanted to finish. With grace, but couldn't. Zen teaches, when we resist grief, it returns disguised as obsession. You think you're obsessed, but what you really are is incomplete. You're not asking for them back. You're asking for a moment that feels finished. And here's the truth that frees you. You don't need their presence to end it. You need your own permission to let the emotion complete itself. You need to stop running from the memory and instead sit with it, like a ceremony. Light a candle in your own heart. Speak the words they never gave you space to say. Cry without hating yourself for it. And close the door with a hand that still shakes but no longer clings. Because healing isn't forgetting, it's finishing. They were the alarm clock, not the destination. You think they were meant to be the ending, the one, the safe place after all the storms. But what if they weren't the ending at all? What if they were the alarm clock that woke you up from the dream you were never supposed to stay asleep in? Some people don't come to love you forever. They come to shake you awake. You were drifting, settling, repeating quiet patterns of emotional survival. You were functioning, but not living. Then they appeared. And suddenly you felt everything. Excitement, fear, vulnerability, hope, all at once. They didn't give you peace. They gave you movement. They stirred the parts of you that had been untouched for years. They didn't make you feel safe. They made you feel awake. In Buddhism, this is sacred. It's called a jolt of consciousness, a spiritual interruption that cracks the illusion of comfort you've been trapped in. Before the Buddha awakened, he wasn't in pain. He was numb. He lived in a palace, surrounded by luxury. But it wasn't until he saw sickness, death, and suffering that he woke up, not because he wanted to, but because the illusion was no longer possible. You were in your own palace of routine, maybe emotionally asleep, maybe telling yourself you were fine, until they walked in and disrupted the sleep. They weren't peace. They were the storm that revealed what peace is not. And yes, you started building a future in your mind. You pictured forever. You got attached to the feeling of something finally starting. But deep down, you felt it. You knew it. Something about them wasn't meant to stay. Because it wasn't love that pulled you to them. It was your soul recognizing the trigger it needed to grow. They were never the destination. They were the turning point. They were the line between who you were before them and who you are becoming now. And that's why it hurts so much. Because it felt so real. But it wasn't real in the way you thought. It wasn't meant to last. It was meant to awaken. And now, your mind is trying to go back to before the awakening. But that's the thing about awakening. Once you see clearly, you can't go back to sleep. You're not grieving a lost love. You're grieving your old self. The self who didn't know what it meant to feel alive, or cracked open, or seen in a way that left you exposed. They were the one who shattered the illusion. They made you realize what you want, what you fear, what you've been avoiding. And now, without them, you think something is missing. But the only thing missing is the illusion. Zen teaches, the finger pointing to the moon is not the moon. They pointed. You followed. And now you're standing in the dark, wondering why the light disappeared. But the light didn't disappear. You're just no longer distracted by the hand. It's time to look up and see that what they pointed to was always you. They came to wake you, not walk beside you. They came to stir the dust, not settle in it. They came to break your rhythm, so you could finally hear the beat of your own soul. You were not abandoned. You were awakened. And even if they're gone, the alarm has already rung. The dream has already ended. And a new self is already rising. You're not craving them. You're craving the feeling of returning to a sacred place you left too soon. You keep telling yourself that you miss them, that you need their voice again, that if you could just sit beside them for one more hour, something inside you would finally feel okay. But what if that's not what your soul is really craving? What if this ache inside you isn't about the person at all? What if it's about a feeling, a sacred, fleeting feeling that you only allowed yourself to experience because they were in the room? In Buddhism, monks return to the same temple every day, not because the temple changes, but because something in them does. Each time they step into that quiet space, the smell of incense, the stillness in the air, the way the light hits the floor at sunrise, all of it reminds them of who they are beneath the noise. That person you can't stop thinking about. They were your temple, not because they were divine, but because you became divine in their presence. You allowed yourself to soften, to trust, to hope, to feel like maybe, just maybe, you weren't too broken to love again. You didn't fall for them. You fell for the space they unlocked inside of you. A space where your soul could finally stretch its arms and feel what it's like to be seen without judgment, to be close without fear, to be quiet without feeling alone. And now, you're not craving their hands. You're craving that sacred place, that room within you that only they seem to have the key to. But here's the truth you've been avoiding. They didn't bring that place. They didn't create it. They just reminded you it was there. They were the doorway, not the destination. You think you're mourning a person, but you're really mourning the version of yourself you discovered when they were around. And now you feel lost, because that version of you felt like home. And without them, you don't know how to find your way back. But you can. You must. Because that sacred place wasn't theirs. It was yours. They didn't carry it with them when they left. It didn't vanish when the calls stopped. It's still inside you, waiting, quiet, undisturbed. You just haven't stepped into it without them before. But the temple is still standing. The light is still there. The version of you that could breathe freely, that could feel something again, that could smile without faking it. That version didn't die. It's only hidden beneath the grief. Zen teaches, don't seek it outside yourself. It's always been within. So maybe the ache isn't for a person. Maybe it's a call to return, to a self you weren't ready to keep. When they walked away, you thought it was them that healed you. But healing doesn't come from the visitor. It comes from the place they helped you unlock. You're not addicted to their presence. You're drawn to your own soul, when it's not pretending to be small anymore. So light the candle again, sit with your breath, and walk back into that temple. Not because they're there, but because you still are. And now, without needing anyone to lead you, you will remember what it feels like to come home, to yourself. You shared karma, not a future. You keep asking, if we weren't meant to be together, then why did it feel so real? Why did they come into your life? So suddenly, so intensely, with that strange sense of familiarity, like you already knew them, before they even said your name. Why did your soul relax around them, even if your mind was on high alert? Why did the silence feel sacred, instead of awkward? There's a reason. In Buddhism, we are taught that some people enter your life, not for the future, but to complete the unfinished energy of the past. It's not romance. It's karma, a spiritual agreement from another life, playing itself out quietly in this one. You didn't meet them by accident. You met them because your soul recognized a debt, a loop, a wound, a promise. You weren't strangers. You were the last page of a story that was left half-written. That's why it felt ancient. That's why it felt like home. And now, they're gone. And you're still holding the feeling, but confused why it never turned into something more. It's because you weren't meant to begin something. You were meant to finish something. They were a closing chapter, not a new book. And that's what's been so hard to accept, because we've been trained to believe that deep connection means forever. But in Buddhism, some of the most powerful connections exist solely to complete an old cycle, not to create a new one. They showed up, triggered your soul, mirrored an old lesson, and left, not because they didn't care, but because their role was never meant to extend. It was meant to echo, to deliver a message from something your spirit had forgotten long ago. And now you're left with the weight of it all, the intensity, the emotion, the what-ifs. But listen closely. You are not being punished. You are being freed. That feeling of, I know you, wasn't false. It was a memory, without a location, a leftover thread. from something that happened before this body, this name, this story. In the Buddhist sutras, even the Buddha recalled meeting people from lifetimes before. He once smiled at a stranger and said, "In another life, you were my mother. You fed me when I was helpless. Today, I offer you water. The karma is complete." That's what this was. You returned to repay something, to feel something, to learn something. And now, the cycle has done its job. The pain you're feeling now is not the pain of loss. It's the pain of detachment from attachment. It's the final tug of a soul that has to let go, even when the heart is still catching up. You're not crazy for feeling so much. You're not broken for not being able to forget. You're just remembering something deeper than your current memory can explain. You're not letting go of a person. You're letting go of a karmic thread that has traveled lifetimes just to reach this moment. So grieve, cry, sit in silence. But no, you're not waiting for them. You're waiting for your soul to whisper, "It's done." And when that whisper comes, and it will, you'll feel the ache loosen, not because they came back, but because your spirit finally moved forward. The ake is not for them. It's for the truth they reflected back to you. You keep aching, but you don't know exactly what for. You miss them, but not every part of them. You replay the memories, but not because you want to go back. You want to go deeper, to understand, to feel again what you felt in those moments where something inside you lit up without permission. There's a reason the wound still breathes. Why the same conversations keep replaying in your head? Why, even after accepting they're gone, your heart still whispers their name in the quiet moments? It's because this wasn't just about them. It was about what they showed you. You didn't fall for a face, or a voice, or a body. You fell for what they made you remember. You saw a truth in them, not their truth, but yours. You saw a version of you that could feel deeply without fear, that could speak without overthinking, that could open up without the voice in your head screaming, "You'll be hurt again." You saw how soft you actually are, how kind, how much love you still had left, even after everything you've been through. They didn't give you that. They only reflected it. And that's why it hurts, because you think the pain is about losing them. But it's not. It's about being separated from the version of yourself you only allowed to exist in their presence. And now that they're gone, you feel like that version disappeared too. But it didn't. It's still here, buried under grief, hiding behind doubt, waiting for you to realize you don't need them to feel you. In Buddhism, the concept of mirror minds teaches us that people show up as reflections, not to stay, but to reveal what's hidden. And that's what they did. They walked in, unannounced, and became a mirror, so precise that you couldn't ignore your own soul anymore. That moment you looked in their eyes and felt safe, that was your truth. That conversation where you said things you've never told anyone, that was your soul finally feeling heard. That sense of, "I know you," was your spirit saying, "I know me when I'm around you." But now they're gone, and the mirror has vanished. So the ache begins, not for them, but for the truth you no longer know how to access without their reflection. And here's the sacred part. You don't need the mirror to see yourself again. You just need stillness, courage, and presence. They showed you your light when you didn't know you had any left. And now it's your turn to learn how to hold it on your own. This ache, it's not a call to chase them. It's a call to become what you saw in their eyes. Zen says, once you meet yourself in someone else, you must return to meet yourself alone. You're not broken. You're unmasking. You're peeling off the layers that said you needed someone else to feel complete. And now that the reflection is gone, you're learning to become the mirror. You saw your softness. You saw your strength. You saw the parts of you that hadn't felt real in years. So stop running after what was lost and start honoring what was found. That was never about them. It was about you, the real you, the remembered you, and no one can take that away again. You're not meant to forget them. You're meant to honor the version of you that met them. Everyone keeps telling you to let go, to move on, to forget. They mean well, but they don't understand what this really was. They don't understand that this wasn't just another person walking into your life. This was a spiritual moment, a timeline split, a soul collision that altered the way you see everything. Before them, you were functioning, maybe healing, maybe surviving. But after them, something shifted. You felt again, laughed in a way you hadn't in years, spoke in tones you forgot you had, softened when all you'd known was armor. They didn't just enter your world. They woke up a version of you that had been buried beneath pain, fear, and silence. And now they're gone. And you think you have to erase them to heal. But that's not true. You're not meant to forget them. You're meant to honor the version of you that came alive in their presence. That version that smiled differently, breathed deeper, held hope like it wasn't dangerous, loved like it hadn't been broken before. That version deserves a memorial, not shame, not regret, not silence. In Zen, there's no such thing as getting over. There is only integrating, taking the lessons, the feelings, the awakenings, and carrying them forward as a part of your spiritual evolution. You think forgetting them will end the pain, but what truly ends the pain is realizing you don't need to forget them to find peace. You just need to stop making their memory the villain. They were the doorway, not the thief. You walked through them into a deeper layer of your own being, and that version of you still exists. You're not stuck. You're just resisting the idea that the beauty you once felt can still live inside you without them. But it can. It must. That version of you who loved so purely, felt so deeply, spoke so honestly, they weren't temporary. They were revealed. They were real. And they're waiting for you to stop grieving them as if they died with that goodbye. They didn't. That version of you is not a ghost. It's a guide. You're not here to forget. You're here to remember why they mattered, what part of your heart they opened, what part of your soul they made you face. And then, you're here to become that version fully, with or without their presence. Zen teaches, the leaf doesn't mourn the wind that moved it. It carries the dance forward in silence. That's what this is. Not the end of something sacred, but the continuation of the version of you that they accidentally awakened. So hold the memory gently, not with obsession, not with guilt, but with reverence. Like a teacher who left too soon, like a book with a torn ending, but still full of pages worth rereading. Let them be part of your story, not your definition. Let their name be a whisper of gratitude, not a wound that reopens. You don't have to forget. You just have to let go of the belief that you need them to feel alive again, because you don't. You are still that person, maybe quieter now, maybe more guarded, but still there, still capable, still worthy, still real. And when the world goes quiet at night, and your thoughts drift back to what could have been, don't fight it. Just breathe and whisper to yourself, I don't need to forget them. I just need to remember me. They weren't your soulmate. They were your soul's interruption. You keep asking why it felt so intense, why it hit you so hard, why it shook you like that, and why someone who wasn't meant to stay still echoes in your chest. Like a name you forgot how to stop whispering. It's because they weren't ordinary. They weren't random. They weren't some passing character in your story. But here's the part that's hardest to accept. They also weren't your soulmate. Not in the way you thought. Not in the way we romanticize soulmates. As the forever kind. Because not all soulmates are meant to stay. Some soulmates arrive like earthquakes, sent not to build a life with you, but to shatter the one you built without truth. They were your soul's interruption, a necessary storm, a divine jolt that came not to complete you, but to awaken you. In Buddhism, we're taught that true awakening rarely comes from comfort. It comes from collapse, from confusion, from being brought to the edge of yourself, and then being asked to keep walking. That's what they did. They took your carefully guarded world and broke it open. And not because they were cruel, but because your soul was ready to transform, and they were the catalyst. You didn't meet them by accident. Your paths crossed. The moment your spirit outgrew the version of you were trying to protect, they came to burn the walls, to challenge the stories you were living in, to remind you that there is still more truth beneath your survival patterns. And yes, you loved them, deeply, silently, maybe more than you've ever loved anyone before. But the love wasn't the lesson. The awakening was. You didn't lose your forever. You found your fault lines. You found out where you still don't trust, where you still chase approval, where you still abandon yourself to feel needed. And that's what makes it so hard. Because it felt like the beginning, but it was really the break between who you've been and who you're meant to become. They weren't your peace. They were your disruption, your mirror, your match thrown into a forest you didn't even know was dry. They set a fire you now have to walk through alone. And that fire hurts, because it leaves you bare, exposed, unearthed. But it also leaves you honest, stripped of illusion, freed from the fantasies you were using to delay your growth. Zen says, before enlightenment, chop wood, carry water. After enlightenment, chop wood, carry water. The world looks the same after awakening, but you don't. And they were the doorway, not the home. The question, not the answer. You keep thinking the pain means something went wrong. But what if it means something finally went right? What if this ache is not a sign of loss, but the birth pains of becoming real? You're not hurting because you were abandoned. You're hurting because your soul finally got what it asked for. And it didn't come wrapped in comfort. It came wrapped in a person who made you feel something so intense that it cracked your shell wide open. And now the light is pouring in, even if it burns. You keep calling it heartbreak, but your spirit calls it liberation. They weren't your forever. They were your transformation. And no matter how much you miss them, no matter how many times their memory slips in, like a quiet wind through a closed window, you have to understand, they were never meant to stay. They were meant to arrive, to stir, to change the temperature of your soul, just long enough for you to feel what you were numbing. And now, it's your turn to take what they revealed and become it. Not for them, not to prove anything, but because your soul is ready. So stop chasing the illusion that they were supposed to stay. Thank them, silently, for what they awakened, and walk forward, shaking, wiser, lighter, stronger, because they were never the ending. They were the invitation. You don't have to forget them. You don't have to hate them. And you definitely don't need to chase them, because they weren't your ending. They were your becoming. You were never meant to stay broken in the space they left behind. You were meant to rise from it, clearer, softer, stronger. This wasn't about holding on. It was about finally seeing yourself without needing their reflection to remember who you are. So if your soul still aches tonight, let it. Not because you're still lost, but because you're still unfolding. You're not here to relive what was. You're here to reclaim what was always yours. Your peace, your depth, your light, your truth. And now that you've seen it, you won't ever lose it again.